Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to Concurrent Session 8. This is UCT Home, so we feel at home. And we're going to have our housekeeping rules first. Please type all your comments and questions in the chat while Ermien is doing her presentation or in all the other presentation. And when during the question and answer session, please raise your hand and we will be recognized either by myself or by my session support, Maraila. I hope I say that her name correctly. Ermien, as a presenter, you have 20 minutes for your presentation.
Yes.
And then we will have 10 minutes for question and answer session.
Right.
Our first presentation is by Ermien van Pletzen, and it's on building an evidence-based academic advising system at the University of the Western Cape. Ermien, your 20 minutes starts now.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, and thank you everyone who's come to our session. It's very exciting for us to present on the academic advising program that we are trying to establish at UCT. So you will see that our title is Building an Evidence-Based Advising System. And I know that on the program I'm down as single presenter, but I just want to show you that we have a big team of people who've been working on this, and you will also see some of them in the presentations that follow. Riashna, you can give me the next slide. So just to give you a little bit of background to our advising program, we are part of the consortium of 7 universities that started this as a national collaborative funded by the UCDP. The overall project run by the very ably by the University of the Free State is called Promoting Student Success Through Academic Advising, and it started as one of the work streams of Siyaphumelela. At UCT, despite our very high admissions policy, admissions practices, our students, we really draw very students and it's highly competitive. We still have high attrition rates and there is a racialized achievement gap that concerns us greatly. At the same time, we certainly experienced very strong student discontent during the must-fall period of student activism, making us realize that we really need to realign our institution with our students' experience. And knowing the strengths of academic advising as one of the high impact practices through the work of George Koo, but in South Africa also through the research of Sonia Lutz and Francois Strydom, we decided to join this program. Riashna, you can move on. So as aims and goals for this program, so as our overall aim is of this presentation is to give an evidence-based account of the processes that we followed between 2018 and 2020 to establish this academic advising system. And our first goal was to build a conceptual capacity and the theory of academic advising. A second goal, to develop an academic advising model responsive to the institution and students. And then thirdly, to start developing structures, relationships, tools, and resources to achieve this. Okay. So if you look at this extraordinary slide that looks like trying to land a rocket in the ocean, you will see that we have these 3 steps aligned to the goals. So the top one is building conceptual capacity, model building, and then structures and relationship. But what binds all these different goals together is that we needed data to strengthen our movement from one to the other and then back. So it is really a cyclic process of collecting data, working out what our model should be while building conceptual capacity. So even though these 3 goals are presented here as steps in our methodology, as separate steps and as linear, they overlap and they happened together, and we had iterative cycles of data collection and feeding back into the system. Thank you. So if we can look at the first goal, and that is of conceptual capacity, building conceptual capacity and building a team, and then also building a theoretical framework. So what I've put there at the top for you is kind of like the intellectual homes that our academic advising system came from. In the first place, we have the academic development program where myself and Riashna are based. And now also Megan Bam. So that is sort of a home where we think about social justice and student success as part of a social justice program. So the academic development program at UCT is housed firstly in that department. Then we expanded the team to the first year experience. So Danny Fontaine joined us, and the two ISPAC program managers, Megan Bam and Carmelita Shong. So that was our collaborative team for 2 years. And then this wonderful group of multidisciplinary, mainly people who've come up through peer advising, joined us. Simphiwe, Dlulani, and Dimakatso, Sebothoma, and Busisiwe, who's coming more from the wellness side, and Deepti, Charitar. So we've ended up with a really strong team assisting with the development of both approaches and spaces. And one of the spaces that we started is a journal club. We really interrogated academic advising models and approaches, and that helped us enormously towards building capacity, building a theoretical framework. You will also see the point on professional training here under spaces, where we develop conceptual capacity of the team. That is the wonderful training program offered by the Free State University, where we could send our advisors to become professional advisors while doing that short course. And then we also had a very strong monitoring and evaluation framework that we started developing from the moment we started. So the first data that we looked at, we followed an informed approach, an informed grounded theory approach, using all the data, the information that we got from the training, from our journal club, from our M&E sessions. And most lately, we've started exploring the capability approach of Amartya Sen, Nussbaum, and then Walker and Wilson Stradum in South Africa. So we find that the capability approach is very strong in harnessing individual agency, but still recognizing the kinds of barriers that institutional structures and policies create for the individual. And we see advising as a very strong enabling factor, enabling system that can move the individual from kind of basic capabilities through to achievements or functionings. Thank you, Riashna. Next slide. So when we looked at our first data, which we collected through interviews with staff and focus group discussions with students, we analyzed that with our initial team of 3 academics, and we found that we have a predominantly faculty-based approach to academic advising at UCT at the moment. The advising that happens in the faculties is highly variable, and I've tried to indicate that with all those silly symbols that I put in each of the faculties. So you have the 6 faculties there arranged around a center, but you see that I left the center fairly blank. I'll talk about that later. The 6 faculties each have their own kind of advising. It's highly variable. It's mainly prescriptive advising, looking at the curriculum and helping students with changes in the curriculum, registration processes, and so on. There's some developmental advising happening, but that is mainly ad hoc, and it may be in the form of a deputy dean, for instance, advising a student about where to go in their career or in their curriculum. Or it could be like ad hoc workshops offered on academic literacies or time management. In two of the faculties, and I marked them with a green tick, we have in commerce and health sciences, we have developmental courses that actually help students develop themselves in terms of their aspirations and also their careers. And those make use of learner-centered and strength-based approaches to academic advising. But on the whole, we have a highly decentralized model with elements of a shared model, which I will show as we move to the next slide. So decentralized but shared with some centralized services. And I've presented this centralized services here in a very organized manner, just to say that we haven't really thought about how to organize the centralized services at this stage. But the Department of Student Affairs obviously is a sort of centralizing system in itself, looking at housing, financial aid, and so forth. But they are functioning outside our advising projects, offering certainly some advising services, but mainly student support. And then these are by far not all the services, but I put in libraries as a sort of academic support network with advising functions. And then at the bottom of the circle, I put ISFAP, which really is the closest to professional advising that we have on campus, with 2 professional advisors tracking a small cohort of students who get funding from ISFAP, and their approach is developmental and strength-based. And then we have a very strong centralized career service, and with a very good track record that also has professional advisors on the career side. Okay, so we can move on. So I've given you some very structured frameworks so far, but overall, I must say we found through our baseline research that there was very poor integration between the faculties. So you have them in the colors, kind of like in the outer layer there. And then even the centralized services, it's a bit like what Diane Grayson said earlier today, really islands and pockets of advice and support that students need to connect themselves. We can move on to the next slide. So we also collected information from students, and I just want to draw your attention to some comments made by students, and I've given you the kind of themes at the top of each of the quotations. We found that even though we thought that from our side we were offering a lot of services and support and advising, the student experience was one of confusing. They found that they lost time trying to work out where they were going, and it built up a lot of negative emotion. So for instance, one student said, when one thing goes wrong, it's more like my foundation is cracked. The whole building is just coming down. So now I have to start afresh. Notice that the student doesn't feel that there's much help, and make a whole new plan. So for me, it takes like a whole week trying to figure out things. And even worse, a student said, I feel like most of your first year is made up of lying in bed, thinking about your failures and trying to revise your plan. So students feel very isolated in trying to make this plan when things go wrong. And this student even said, no one told me that I will fail so much. And these are students who came out of our basic education system as top candidates. What students said about academic advisors is that, especially here about academics who are advisors. So you look at them, the academic staff, and you're like, you don't even know what I'm going through. I feel like with a group of students, you know, because they went through this, I can trust them. So this student, thank you for the time. this student feels that peer advisors could better give advice, but peer advisors themselves say, it seems as though now we have to take on the roles of being a psychologist and so forth. And it's very anxiety provoking for the peer advisors themselves. So we can move on to the next slide. So part of our development of our model was to develop a definition, a vision, and a mission. I will leave you with this, and just to say that our mission was to enable students to achieve their educational career and life goals along the full experience of their time at UCT. So we want to connect that journey for students. We can go to the next. So what we came up with was a shared model of academic advising, and by shared we mean shared between decentralized and centralized services. So there's no way that a university like UCT is going to become strongly centralized. So again, the way Professor Grayson was saying, we have a decentralized system, but we need to make the connections better. So you will see this model again, but you will see that it's a model that is provided by 3 different kinds of advisors. In the middle, the faculty advisors at the top, the professional advisors connecting faculty, and then peer advisors at the bottom, and at the broadest part of the model. And then right at the bottom, we have automated advising, and you will see that the linkage is through referral throughout, and the kind of approaches that are taken are prescriptive at the top, developmental, where you get to the professional advisor side, and mostly referral and informational as you move to the bottom. Okay. And then if we look at our 3rd goal, which is about early implementation of structures, relationships, tools, and resources, just to give you a sense, the data framework, we had great difficulty in finding a way of working across silos and really finding an integrated data framework. But I sort of showed you a cross and a tick. The tick is that this work really took off when we joined the Siyaphumelela partnership. So I think we are making really progress on the data framework now that we are a Siyaphumelela partner. We've made some progress around structural integration, and we've run some pilots. Some of them were very successful, others, for instance, the Health Sciences Student Resource Center was very successful, but not financially sustainable. You can move on to the next. And then just to dwell a moment on the COVID-19 moment. I'm not going to say a lot about that because my colleagues are going to speak about that, but it's certainly a situation, a context that catalyzed innovative concept and centralized systems development. And it was a test for our model. And if you move to the bottom of the slide, it's also a test for our theory, for our approaches and our theory, because with COVID-19, we have a lot of structural barriers that have suddenly, some of them were there already, but they've kind of like jumped to the foreground. And it requires a lot of development to connect individual and individual agency within this kind of like this real kind of obstacle course to achieve their educational journey. So we can move on to the next. It's my last slide around lessons learned. We feel that it's really important, and we've learned that it's really important to conceptualize academic advising as a system of practice. Again, drawing on at the presentation of Professor Grayson, you need to focus on interconnections. You have your purpose, you have your functions, but the interconnectedness is what makes it a system in the end of all those disparate components. And we are hoping that with our model, we have envisaged that kind of, that we can put and operationalize a system of practice. We also find that staff capacity is key, both in terms of the size of the team. I mean, when I started thinking about this, I was on my own. Then couple of people joined me, and in the end, we snowballed into a really nice multidisciplinary team. The training that we got, and the fact that we were based in a UCDP project with those other 6 universities enabled a lot of interinstitutional learning that was extremely valuable. And then ideally, you need to work in a network of all stakeholders with common objectives within your institution. It helps to integrate with the institutional vision and strategies, because that way you get endorsement from the higher levels. And we've done that in formulating our vision, mission, and our definition of advising. And then throughout, it's really important to feed the student experience into the system building. And I'm going to hand over to my colleagues now to unpack some of these areas further. Yeah, I don't know whether there are questions at this point.
There are no questions posted on the chat, but we're now in the 10 minutes of question and answer. And if your colleagues also wants to contribute into the discussion, they are more than welcome to do that. But first, let me get a sense from the group. Are there any questions from the floor?
Dimakatso had a hand up.
Yeah.
Dimakatso, you can go ahead.
Thank you. It was just a clap for Ermien. Thank you.
So that was a different kind of hand. Thank you, Dimakatso. Elizabeth, I went like a steam train. I just want to say that the data framework stuff at UCT, the development of that also, of course, got a boost through our DAS team. So the DAS and Siyaphumelela teams work very closely together to develop a data framework that works across silos at UCT. And when we were working on our own, trying to get access to data through our data warehouse and so on for advising purposes, we really struggled. And it's only when it became an institutional project with a kind of purpose and with the kind of support that we had through Siyaphumelela that that really started taking off.
Thank you, Ermien. I see there are still no hands. I'm going to just ask, sorry, Riashna.
Sorry, Elizabeth. I would like to ask a question. I can't figure out how to put my hand up, though.
Okay, no problem. I will give you a chance to ask now.
Okay.
You can go ahead.
Okay. Ermien, I would like maybe just for the audience to if you could maybe elaborate a bit more on how the COVID, how sort of, when the project started, as you mentioned, it was a very small, in a sense, enterprise with you kind of trying to visualize this, and how this COVID moment has led to a structural integration that, given impetus to structural embedment and integration that we probably wouldn't have imagined happening so quickly before.
Yes, I think that what we became aware of through COVID was that we needed to connect students quickly in an emergency with a whole range of services, information, and so forth. So the idea of an integrated system became forefront. And so Riashna, I didn't want to say too much in my own presentation about that, because I know that the next presentations will be talking about some of that. But
I was talking about the governance structures, yes, and how it's come to the fore.
Yeah. So I think what we found was that we formulated a model, and we formulated a kind of set of principles and a system and so on, and then COVID happened. And on the one hand, I mean, like, we were all incredibly shocked, of course, and really running around trying to kind of get services ready. But on the other hand, we found that our model and our set of structures seemed to give us answers as well, so that we could deploy from our academic advising system, even though it was really just starting up and finding its feet, we could deploy a team to work very much on developing new forms of advising that were more, in the one case, it was the CARES hotline that was with a team of peer advisors. And then on the other hand, we started working on automated ways of giving information to students. And that in itself led to an expansion of the team, in that we got peer advisors from other projects like the Health Sciences Pilot Project, pulled into a far more integrated system of development, which kind of fed into the centralized part of developing referral networks for students. So that process of, I mean, right at the beginning, we had what we called the stakeholder map, which came out of our baseline data of 2018. But then suddenly that work was accelerated very quickly, pulling all those stakeholders from the centralized services and the faculties together to make one kind of referral network sheet that the peer advisors could be working from. Yeah. So, I mean, I would also like to invite my team members to contribute if they feel that there's something that they would like to add here.
Team members, you have 3 minutes, the last 3 minutes to contribute. Otherwise, if there is anyone who has a question, now is your chance to ask Prof. Ermien van Pletzen a question on building an evidence-based academic advising system. If there are no further questions, okay. Maybe I can just ask Ermien, how important was it to include also not only the first year experience, but other student experience into the building of your academic advising model?
Elizabeth, that's a very good question. We certainly are aiming at transitions right across the student's journey. So we do build in experience from other years of study, and even right through into postgraduate study. And we're pulling into our framework a number of interventions from the faculties. You know, I mean, we are drawing in the work of our writing centers, for instance, where there's very strong support of students right across their curriculum. So yeah, and then during the COVID time, we collected through DAS, we collected information on all student experience. So though we started off with a team member from first year experience, I wouldn't say that we are particularly focusing on the first year experience.
Thank you, Ermien. And I think that will be the end of Ermien's presentation, and we can give Ermien a hand of it.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Thanks.
Thank
my
you.
audience.
Thank you.
Well done for an insightful presentation. Our next presentation will start shortly in 1 minute. If the presenter is in the house, you can share your screen while we wait for the exact time. In case there are people coming from another session and wants to join the conversation or the presentation. Okay, from my time, it shows that it is 10:40. Welcome again to another UCT presentation where we're going to hear from UCT personnel on UCT CARES, providing connection to a disconnected system. Like I already told Ermien, You have 20 minutes for presentation, and then we will have a 10 minutes Q&A at the end. Your 20 minutes starts now.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm assuming you can see my slides and hear me. Good morning, everyone. I am Riashna Sithaldeen from the University of Cape Town, where I am a Deputy Director in the Academic Development Program. So thank you all very much for this opportunity to speak about a development that we have made at UCT, which emerges as a COVID response, as a response to the COVID moment, but is something that has is fast becoming a structure that looks to be here to stay. So today I'm going to present on this service. It's called UCT CARES, and it is an initiative of the Academic Advising Project that Ermien just talked about. And the original additional authors are all part of the CARES team. So you see the list of authors below. And the title of my talk today is Providing Connection to a Disconnected System. Ermien already talked to us about how we have this very siloed effect at UCT where you've got a huge number of support systems, but they sit in sort of these independent spaces. And what the CARE system was designed to do was to have two very clear functions. And the two functions are to provide students with information as they need it. And then the other was to refer students to an appropriate support service as they need. And overall, the overarching purpose of this system is to get students the help they need as quickly and as seamlessly as possible. So that is the overriding purpose of this work. So as mentioned by Ermien already, and I won't go into too much detail on this, but this is the Academic Advising Project is part of a 3-year UCDG in academic advising that was it was a Siyaphumelela work stream. And what I want to highlight here though, is that baseline study that was done in that project gave us a really good understanding of what was missing at UCT in terms of student support and what was needed in terms of these structures. And ultimately what we found is what we needed was a point of connection. Because the devolved nature of student support can often mean that a student will have to ask the same question multiple times and multiple departments. They also have to relay their narrative multiple times, constantly being referred to someone else. And often, and this is sometimes the result of the fact that the student simply doesn't know the difference between something like the fees office, financial aid, and the treasury department, right? So they don't really know what the purpose of a service is, so they try them all. And as a result, students experience a lot of frustration in accessing the services they need. And when we switched to emergency remote teaching, this was really exacerbated, in particular for first-year students who, of course, had only been at the institution for a couple of weeks. And I found the way I try to describe it is when you are on campus physically, you have a way of navigating the space. You have landmarks with which you navigate the space. And as we moved into online, even the more experienced students lost those landmarks of where do you go if you need help with a certain thing. So this was designed in order to try and mitigate against some of that. So Ermien also in the previous talk talked about the model that was developed in this baseline study. So this framework that we had gave us a really good grounding for structuring this pilot because it allowed us to understand what the nature of the work should be, what it should encompass, and also how it fits into the bigger picture. So for example, if we look at this model, we've got all these different types of advisors at the bottom. We've got automated advising. And with CARES, we were really able to target these peer advisors. Like how do we incorporate peer advisors into a system? And then we also already had an understanding of what types of advising needed to happen. We talk about prescriptive, developmental, and what CARES was able to do is tap into to target the niches of referral advising and informational advising. And on the left-hand side of that pyramid, where we talk about referral, what CARES has been doing is designing referral mechanisms. One of the challenges that we still have with that referral mechanism is closing the loop. And we are hoping to make progress on that once this does become a bit more of a sort of, it gets the thumbs up as part of UCT support structures, then we will have a mandate to close that loop with the referral structures, with the referrals. So again, my title refers to CARES as providing connection to a disconnected system. So what is the disconnected system that I'm referring to? Now, many institutions will relate to this, right? There's what we call the silo effect, where what you have is a highly decentralized institution. It has a number of support structures, but they each operate with a large degree of autonomy. On top of that autonomy of function, they also have a lot of autonomy in terms of the data capture systems. So for example, we were having a conversation with some colleagues from Residence Life the other day, and they were telling us that they have an entire data set that they don't really know what to do with, but that captures the experience of about 50 to 60% of our students. So it is remarkable to me how big some of these silos are and how big the gaps between them are. The other thing that we don't have at UCT, the moment that we're working on getting in place, is a student tracking system. So while students jump from one of these silos to the next, there's no way to follow that path of the student either. So that experience is lost, and it is often repetitive. And so the result ultimately is that we have a lot of student frustration and fatigue. And so it doesn't matter how much we provide, the fact that they're not connected to each other, that the students can't navigate them easily, makes them not as effective as they could be. So what then is this innovation for connection that I am referring to? So I'm going to be describing UCT CARES and what it is and how it was developed. And what it is the Central Advising and Referral System. That's what the acronym means. And then it is how you connect to UCT CARES via a simple email address at the moment, which is uctcares@uct.ac.za. And this serves as a single point of contact into that greater support network. So you have this huge network behind you. Students don't know how to navigate it. We act as a kind of a compass to help them navigate. So we designed the system that allows students to log queries easily. It allows the query handler to analyze the query effectively, and then allows them to refer the query appropriately. The technology is very simple. CARES is an email help desk with multiple agents who handle queries on a rotational basis. And the agents are peer advisors who you will hear more from later or after me, I think. And they will relay their experience of working in the system. So it sounds very simple, but really it takes a lot to build something that is effective. So the simple part of it is the process of student connection. So a student has a query, they send us an email, and then the agent in charge at that particular time will digest that email. So they will make some decisions, and I'll explain a little bit about how they make those decisions, but they will make some decisions about whether they have the appropriate information to answer that query immediately, or that they have to then refer that query into UCT support system. And the diagram on the right-hand side shows some of the major services to which we refer our queries. And I'd just like to point out that because this was a COVID response, in a sense, We only launched in April 2020. So all of this is still very new. So then what does it take to design something like this? So the first thing, as I mentioned, we needed an overarching purpose for our system, which was to get students to the help they need as quickly as possible. We identified our functions, which was to provide information or refer. And so we needed to know what are the components within the system that will allow us to meet these functions. And the components that we identified was that we needed agents, we needed people who handled the queries. We needed a central repository for those queries to go into. We needed to handle those queries in some way. The data that came in and was collected then needed some form of reporting. So we needed to collect data, analyze it, and report it. And then we needed some way to take that information. So what we have been doing is having a really nice feed into things like the Vulnerable Students Working Group, the Teaching Online Task Team, the Academic Development Advisory. These are all the groups to which we have been taking some of the patterns of concern that are emerging. So how did we go about designing the system? So as I said, it's a simple system from the students' interface, but really there's a lot going on in the background. So in terms of the agents, we needed to identify, we needed to produce materials and content that allowed us to onboard our agents in a seamless and continuous way. So we developed a number of materials that allowed us to do this. So these are just some snapshots of some of the documents that we've created, which include a training manual, which every agent reads. We have a facilitation guide. So once they've gone through the manual, they then go through a training process, and the facilitator has a facilitation guide that is an accompaniment to the training manual. We also have a standard operating procedure manual, which is basically how often do you collect the data? How often do you report it? Where does this go? How do you do agent rotation? And what is really good about all of this is it provides real consistency and continuity to the work. So should I not be able to lead the project anymore because of other obligations, we already have all the documents in place, and we have a team of people who understand how to do this. We also have a non-standard non-disclosure agreement that all peer advisors will sign. So in terms of the mailbox then, we have a shared mailbox, as I mentioned. And when the queries come into that shared mailbox, they need to be digested. And they're digested according to a process laid out in our query handling process. And so this is a decision tree, essentially, that agents will go through as they deal with each query. And obviously they will apply of their own experience, their training, and also some of their own knowledge to this as well. But ideally, they should be following the same process. All agents should be following the same process. So I mentioned once the queries come in, they have to be handled. They are handled according to the query handling process, but that query handling process is also supported by a number of additional components. The first one on your left is the student query information sheet. And the student query information sheet is a live document, a living document, I should say, that is constantly updated with all forms of communication, important communications that come out of things like the DVC desks, our communications and management department, things that we know about faculties, the laptop program. So this is always being updated. It's in a central searchable repository for agents to be able to access. The other thing that we've developed based on, and it started with that stakeholder map that Ermien mentioned earlier, is a referral list. And this support referral list not only tells the agents who to send the query to, but it also defines the purpose of each of those services that the stakeholders themselves helped us put together. And I have to say here that working with the stakeholders in that moment of COVID, as we were launched into this pandemic response, has been remarkable. People's willingness to support students as much as possible and to collaborate and engage has been amazing. So we also, in that handling of queries, we have a WhatsApp group of senior advisors, like our ISFAP advisors, who then help the agents with queries that they may not know how to handle. And we also then have a log sheet. So every query is logged onto a data capture sheet. And that data is then reported on a weekly basis into a catch-up meeting. Or the data is can be disaggregated by faculty, by the types of queries, where we're sending those queries to, and how we are in fact resolving those queries. So that's what it took really to design a system that of components that speak to each other and also that feed back to each other. We have weekly meetings where we speak to the agents, then they will talk a little bit about that in their next presentation. But it's a continuous process of refinement. So if something's not working, we're able to very quickly go in and try and fix it. So how has it gone? I guess the data tells us how it's gone. So here's some of our summary data. So we launched in April 2020. In 9 months, we got about, this is a service that nobody had heard about before. So we were quite pleased with our numbers, about 437 queries we dealt with, and we were able to resolve about quarter of them at the first point of contact. So that means not referring them in. And I just want to iterate here that these are often very involved queries. So these are not simple information questions that require a quick answer. A lot of these queries require the agent to investigate, to contact a person behind the scenes, get a response, or make a connection that way. And then this year, 2021, in the first 6 months, we doubled those numbers of queries that we dealt with. A larger percentage dealt with at the first point of contact. About 50% of those queries having to be referred into the greater network. And then the other data that we do collect is that we are able to disaggregate by faculty, types of queries, and that sort of thing. So what was really great about developing a very comprehensive system is it allowed us the opportunity to expand when the opportunity arose. So for example, we were approached by the Deputy Dean of Undergraduate in Commerce saying they needed help dealing with queries from pre-arrival students. And so we helped them. We set up a ComCares hub. We trained the agents into our system, and those agents were able to deal with about 517 queries from November to February of pre-arrival students. And that was really great because it gave us the data we needed to suggest that we needed further expansion. And so we've now applied and been successful in a UCDG in academic advising that will allow us to launch hubs in each of the different faculties. We're very excited. We've got 4 faculties pretty much ready to go for the next semester, and they will be dealing with very specific faculty-based queries. And this comes as a very good time because everyone is inundated, overwhelmed with the number of queries they're having to deal with. So this is a kind of resource that faculties are really happy to onboard, some faculties. We've also developed 2 new services. We have a CARES counselor, which is a collaboration with our student wellness service, where we have a certified counselor who then takes various particular queries that relate to mental health, deals with them or refers them into the student wellness service. And then a new service, which was the CARES outreach service. It's brand new. It was basically just yes, we can help. And now we're thinking of putting together proper protocols for this work as well. And what this is when staff, academics aren't able to contact students, students have fallen off the grid and we need to try and find them. We have one of our agents try and track those students down and has been very successful in doing that. So those are the plans for expansion. So what are sort of some of the challenges? I mean, this all sounds like a very smooth story, but of course there's always challenges. One of the major challenges has been funding. We've sort of had to borrow from various projects because there isn't really a sort of ad hoc funding that sits around waiting for these as needed developments to happen. We've had limited existing expertise in this, and we've had to learn as we go. We've had to borrow human resources at the beginning. As we've become more embedded and more structured, we are able to source funds and hire people in a full time, but we've often had to borrow time. And we don't know where all this data will go yet. So as part of our structural integration into UCT's data support systems, we will need to think about that. How does it become embedded into UCT support structures? And then, of course, we need to look at our monitoring and evaluation processes. And I've got my last slide. So my last slide here, we are referring to the lessons that we've learned. And what we've learned in doing this work is that having that baseline study, so understanding what is in your system, in your university, is really important because it allows you to just find those gaps that you can fill. It allowed us to capitalize on an opportunity that COVID presented. And while we started small, I think what's really important to understand here is that we always were planning for scale. And what that meant was that we had to think systemically from the word go. It wasn't ad hoc, it wasn't a Band-Aid approach. Even if we were dealing with 5 queries a day, we needed a query handling process to do that professionally. And the other really important lesson learned is that lean on your university resources, collaboration, because that really diminishes how much you have to put in right at the beginning and allows others to feel a part of the system and take and have some ownership of what you're developing, and so are usually more willing to give more. And that is, with that, I'll say thank you for your time, and I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Riashna, for a wonderful presentation. Are there any questions or comment, query? I see the chat is empty. Anyone who wants to ask a question?
Very quiet audience today.
Manila, you can go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you for a most interesting presentation. I was just quite curious when you showed us the numbers of queries that you dealt with in 2020 and 2021. And while I'm not taking away from the fact that these queries were probably complex and required a lot of time and effort to resolve, I was actually surprised that the number was so low. Because I'm not sure, exactly what the enrollment is at UCT, but I know it's pretty large. So in relation to the entire enrollment of your student population, 430 odd questions last year, and in a time of crisis, seemed quite low. So I was just wondering whether you could comment on that. Is it because, how are students made aware of this service in the first place? And, do you feel that the uptake was actually quite low, or is that just my misconception?
No, absolutely. I hope I'm saying this right, Marilla. Yeah, so there are a number of complicating factors here. So the first is that you're absolutely right, the numbers are quite low, and there's a reason. The reason for that is when we started, as I mentioned, this was a brand new service. So what we've identified is that students will keep going to the channels that they already know. So when we look at the kinds of data that are coming out of places like the International Students Office, places like the faculty offices. I mean, they were reporting just overwhelming numbers of queries that they were just being flooded with, inundated with. And so one of the reasons why we didn't market the service into too wide an audience right at the beginning is because we didn't really have a lot of resources, right? I was basically answering queries full time for the first little while before we were able to onboard any kind of agents, and I have a full-time job. So we kept it small because we wanted to develop a robust system first. And we didn't want to be making phone calls and taking all this. So there's part of it is deliberate. Part of it is that we know students keep going to the channels that they know. So students mostly will email their faculties, and which is why we are now trying to create these nodes that allow the faculties to then market that as part of the faculty support, and then students will be able to hopefully take advantage of that. The other thing that we did do during this period, which I don't want to detract from the next talk, is we actually onboarded a simple chatbot as well during this time. And that chatbot in like 4 months dealt with 44,000 queries from 17,000 original users. So we were kind of doing all kinds of development at the same time, but it was really the CARES work itself was really about developing the structure and the system and making it robust. Yeah.
Thank you. That was very interesting. Thank you.
Okay, Sonia, you are up.
Yes, may I please ask, how do you recruit your peer advisors, and how many hours per month do they then support their peers?
Thank you, Sonia. So unfortunately, I don't have a very exciting answer for that. It was really an ad hoc sort of, this person knew that person who knew that person, because we were really kind of rolling with what was needed as we went. So for example, our first peer advisor was Deepti Charitar, who will also be speaking today. And she came to us from the Health Sciences Resources Hub. So we asked if they had anyone, and she came to us through that work. She knew someone else who had done some peer advising in the past and referred Dimakatso to us. And then Simphiwe joins us from the humanities EDU, where he had been doing a number of care calls as well. So this is very much word of mouth of high level, high functioning individuals who had some experience with academic advising. However, with things like the, for example, the commerce cares and the new hubs that we are putting together, we are using a proper recruitment process. We have asked the faculties to identify what kind of pool of people that they want to act as peer advisors. They've largely gone with orientation leaders who they find are very committed to student support. And so we've been doing a proper application and process for those peer advisors. And then we do the training, of course, to make sure that they are up to speed with the system. Sorry, what was your second question, Sonia?
Sorry about that. I wanted to know about the hours that they work every month, and their remuneration as well, if it is possible.
Sure. So we started out with, so as a student, you can only work up to 20 hours per week. So if you're a peer advisor at UCT, HR says you can only work up to 20 hours per week. And so we have been working on that basis. We pay our peer advisors at the moment at what we call full control tutor rates. So whatever that is at your institution. And so we do it in a paid on claim basis. So they have a maximum at which they can work, and then they work paid on claim. And as far as we have been able to afford we have been onboarding our more senior advisors into full-time contracts as soon as we are able to get funding for them, not full-time permanent, but year-on-year contracts so that they can work more hours. The CARES line is meant to be peopled from 8 in the morning until 4. We've only been able to do that because we've been using rather senior postgraduates who then work rotationally, and they will check the email inbox, you know, every hour, every 2 hours on the day of their responsibility.
Thank you.
Okay, I am sorry, I'm going to be that person who cuts people off, but that's been part of my job today.
No problem.
So we come to an end. Thank you, Riashna, and we can give a round of applause for Riashna for a wonderful presentation. As we move along, since we are still in the UCT house, we are guests here. They are going to shower us with more information about the care system. Now we're going to hear from the UCT team on a narrative account of peer advising and insights gained as a CARES agent during emergency remote learning. You can take it away, like we said, 20 minutes presentation, and then 10 minutes for question and answer. Team, your platform is yours.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. I am Dimakatso. I will be presenting today with my colleague Simphiwe, and our colleagues that are mentioned below were also part of this work. Our presentation is it's titled A Narrative of Peer Advising, Insights Gained as UCT CARES Agents During Emergency Remote Teaching.
Sorry, Dimakatso, can you put it on a presentation mode, slide mode? Thank you.
Is it okay? All right. As CARES agents, we attend to a central mailbox that was launched as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic, as Riashna has just detailed recently. Our key responsibility is to either answer the query directly or to refer the query into UCT's support network, enabling a seamless connection between students and student support structures within the university. In our role, we are supported by several resources, including senior advisors that we can contact on WhatsApp. Why peer advising is important? The constantly shifting conditions of the COVID-19 pandemic had a tremendous impact on everyone, including us as peer advisors and the students we were serving. Peer advising had a great contribution to the institution by supporting students and subsequently promoting student success. As peer advisors, we had to read hundreds of emails. We looked for options that would help students and, where possible, develop effective strategies. At times, immediate options are obvious, but some students, they need much more than the routine referral approach. We try to empower students, reassure them that the university is doing everything it can to assist them, whether it is with accommodation, loan, laptop, financial aid, or mental health problems, even when we are not certain ourselves. Students need compassion, clarity, and a sense of direction. As peer advisors, we believe we did our best and we continue to provide that for students. In the next section of the presentation, I will give a brief background of myself, the UCT training that I received, the type of queries that I attended to, and the debriefings. I'm from the Faculty of Engineering, and I have previously studied remotely, but unlike students who choose to study at UCT, for me, it was a decision that I had made and I had prepared myself for it. Most students that had just come out of high school, they expected a lecturer to stand in front of them, talk to them through their course material. First year student only had a few weeks of first year experience, and then the university had to close down. Adjusting to university on its own, it's difficult. And now students had to adjust with remote learning. I know as a student, when you get stuck, when I get stuck with my work, it's easier for me to ask someone to explain things to me. It can be a student or a lecture. The person can write things down, or I can even remember the information when I'm alone. Unlike when it's on the phone, from the engineering background, you can't have someone draw things or give structures to you over the phone. As much as I could relate to students with studying remotely and the challenges of being alone and struggling or grasping with certain concepts, the challenges that students had to face and they continue to face are much greater than what I went through. And really, studying without support is very difficult. While I had not previously worked as a peer advisor, my understanding of distance learning came as a resource, and CARES provided extensive quality training. I was trained on advising, professionalism, and communication. With the advising, the training included advisory approach, coaching and mentoring, boundaries and referrals. We're told we need to know when to stop. We cannot save everyone, and also creating a rapport with students. We were also trained on faculty offerings and common queries, listening and types of queries, CV reviews, and networking. With professionalism, we might think that certain things are obvious. With email etiquette, for example, appropriate greeting and showing empathy to students, even when the student's email is rude or they are unclear. And with communication, language has proved, and it continues to prove, to be a problem. I would sometimes ask for more details or clarity from a student if I do not understand what the student is trying to say, and the email would still come back unclear. At times, I do respond to the emails on assumption, assuming what the student is trying to say, because I want to provide as much information as possible, hoping it answers the student's question. It is a bit difficult to give advice online because you do not get an immediate reaction or facial expression, a nod, or even a response. With the type of queries that we received, we noticed that there's a lack of resources. With online or distance learning, sometimes people are overwhelmed, or students are overwhelmed with lectures also. They take time to respond to emails or messages. Students are not even comfortable to post questions on online platforms that are provided. Time management and discipline is very important when you're studying online. Unfortunately, for most students, based on the queries that we received, it's very difficult to study while they're at home. They do not have dedicated learning space. They mentioned this in the emails. Some students have chores. They have to complete their chores before they can focus on their work. And then when they're done, they're either tired or left behind on their work. Others mentioned that they work part-time. Some students mentioned that they're struggling with their eyes. They spend too much time on the screen. They asked for printed material to be posted to them. We received a lot. One of the things that happened, we received a lot of queries about the loan laptops program that UCT is running. ICT has used that information to see how many students needed laptops couriered into other provinces for students who could not come and collect those loan laptops. And with academic advising, some of the queries we attended to, students, they needed assistance with managing their workload. Some wanted to find out how to drop some electives, or they need advice with their career path and time management. And with debriefing sessions, UCT CARES noted that queries we're dealing with had a potential to affect our mental health. We had sessions with a trained psychologist, a very energetic session. We were given scenarios on how to respond to if you get a hysteric student or a rude or suicidal student, or just a check-in on yourself if you are not comfortable with any aspects of your life. The service is available. If you're struggling with your studies, we can get access to that. We do weekly reports. We have catch-up meetings, and we provide, that is a platform where most queries are ventilated. If there's follow-ups with certain departments that is required, the queries go there. And then when we realize that most students are struggling with those services or departments. I will be handing over to Simphiwe, my colleague. He will be giving his reflections from now.
Okay, thank you, Dimakatso. So I got introduced to the work of peer advising in the Humanities Education Development Unit, where I was actually in contact with students within the department on face-to-face basis, like every day. My main task was to listen to students' concerns and queries, and this actually entailed understanding a student query, then refer or direct that query to the student support structure and for relevant assistance. This required me to actually understand the student language, and actually which sometimes can be more fragmented because students are often confused and speak about a lot of things at the same time. This made me to be more compassionate and patient, and most of all to listen and not be judgmental, because as having experience as a student myself, I know that it gets very frustrating when someone whom you seek assistance from is not willing to listen, but instead passing judgment on you. This was indeed a challenging experience because I found myself sitting on the other side of the table. And then I moved to UCT CARES. I was also expected there to play the same role, but the only difference was that I was no longer interacting with students on face-to-face basis. But even in that context, it was easy for me to understand students' queries, although I received them through emails because I had done that before. At UCT CARES, I received quite an intensive training from a very, very formalized and systematic query handling process, which Riashna has already spoken about, and to email etiquette, to actually maintain some level of email professionalism when communicating with students and other stakeholders of the university. And also we were taught about maintaining a high level of confidentiality so that it is ensured that the information that we deal with and we receive from students is actually treated with a high level of confidentiality. The challenge I encountered at UCT CARES was that I had to know and remember the name of departments and contact persons when referring students, as opposed to when I was sometimes just referring students to different buildings by their names, when I was interacting with them face-to-face at HAM EDU, because you could actually use landmarks sometimes, as also Riashna has alluded to this in her presentation. You could actually use landmarks to refer students because you are physically on campus. But fortunately, with the CARES training, we're provided with a referral list that gets updated continuously with contact persons and departments that we need to refer students to. UCT CARES types of queries. The COVID-19 pandemic has really presented universities with new challenges, particularly those that are experienced by students. When I was at HAM EDU before the pandemic, I mainly dealt with queries that relate to accommodation, curriculum changes, financial aid, food assistance, etc. But the pandemic presented us with a new set of queries that relate to technological resources, which other presenters have already alluded to these sort of queries, other presenters from other institutions of higher learning that have been presenting throughout the conference. And before the pandemic, these queries were neither not there or very, 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 very minimal. And obviously, I'm basing this on my personal experience of interacting with students. Students were scattered around the world in different geographical locations. Some of these locations have very poor network reception, and students often struggled with access to internet as a result of this remote learning. And some students do not have adequate technological devices, and some are not technologically savvy because of their educational background. I found out that these types of issues actually exacerbated the mental condition of students and led to various mental health issues. And also I found out that some students are not confident to study on their own without a lecturer in front of them. And in some cases, as they often studied from home, the environment there is not conducive for their studies. Because I often received queries from students citing issues of gender-based violence at home, and robberies, protests, and sometimes intermittent electricity supply around their communities. The other problem is that some students just switch off and not engage with their studies because they are extremely depressed mentally and emotionally. As a result of this, at UCT CARES, we, from time to time, also Riashna has alluded to this, from time to time, we received queries from faculties with students that have not been participating in their programs. And we have an outreach initiative whereby we reach out to those students by phone calls and actually try to find out as to how they are doing and why they are not interacting or participating with their studies. Through this, I found out that sometimes students just want to talk and need someone who will just reach out to them and listen. As a result of this intervention, we have had students revive and really coming to their studies more positive and wanting to succeed in their studies. These are really queries that emerge as a result of the pandemic, as I did not deal with them while at HAM EDU before the pandemic. And we also have a debriefing sessions, and because as a CARES agent and someone who deals with these types of queries on a daily basis, you tend to be affected psychologically and emotionally by these challenges that students are going through, because you understand as a student what it means to go through all of this. But at UCT CARES, we have a CARES counselor whom sometimes you consult from time to time for debriefing purposes, because you also as an agent would like to talk to someone just to vent and pour out your frustrations. Thank you, Dimakatso. The pandemic has exposed deep-seated challenges in our society. Most of the queries that we dealt with were an indication of these societal challenges. Obviously, this had an impact on how institutions of higher learning engage with students and actually enabled these institutions to actually understand their students. For instance, this is why at UCT CARES, a system was established in order to help students get connected with student support structures remotely. The higher education sector has proven to be very resilient in the period of uncertainty and danger, and this shows that indeed the future is very bright. Thank you.
Thank you, Dimakatso and Simphiwe, for a excellent presentation. It clearly shows that UCT cares about the student and also cares about the agent. Are there any comments, questions? There is none in the chat. So if you have any comment or question for UCT team.
I see Riashna has her mic open. Do you have anything to say, Riashna? Or you closed it?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Going on with my screen and I cannot see any of the buttons. Apologies for that. I just wanted to make a comment rather than ask a question, and firstly to say thank you to Simphiwe and Dimakatso for that excellent presentation. They just did a fantastic job with that. What I wanted to comment on in this process, it kind of speaks a little bit to the question that I was asked earlier as well, is how important it was to really start small and really build a system. And you know, so this year we have just launched a social media campaign. We'll be doing further advertising and marketing of the service. We're going to be launching some other products, which you'll hear about in the next talk. But just to say, in terms of listening to the presenters, how important it was that they had the proper training that was in place before they started, that they had the proper spaces, a fora in which to share what they were experiencing. And a comment from my side was that we really couldn't have done it in terms of the kind of service that we provide, that every student's story counts, without the peer advisors, because it is their connection to the students that allows us to really empathize and take the time. You know, I'm a logistics operations person, which means I want everything done fast, and you really need people who really empathize to slow it down. And for me, this has been an incredibly valuable addition to our team, to this process and this work. So peer advisors for the win here. Thanks.
Thank you, Riashna. There is a question in the chat for Dimakatso and Simphiwe. Any comment on the mentioned yesterday of gendered effect in advising? Students preferring to speak to an advisor of the same gender, or being reluctant to be as open with someone of a different gender?
Okay, thank you for the question. We have received queries whereby students actually say they want their information to be withheld between themselves and us as agents. But we have never really received a query whereby a student says they would like to speak to a particular agent of a particular gender. I'm not sure if my colleague Dimakatso, during her experience, has actually come across such a query. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. I think mainly because students, they do not know really who they're sending an email to. They do not know who's responding. And the email, when it goes out, it comes from UCT CARES. And also we are trained to show empathy to students. So I don't think a student can really tell who they're talking to, but we, like my colleague has mentioned, we have not received any query, someone mentioning that they do not want to speak to any person of any gender. Thank you.
Can I just throw in the funny incident we did have, Simphiwe and I? There was a student who had a query about pregnancy, and neither Simphiwe nor myself, who is a child-free wonder, had an answer. And so we had to go to our colleagues to get an answer about that.
There was a hand and I guess it went away. Ermien, you were...
Sorry, I was going to say Elmin's hand.
Ermien, floor is yours.
Thanks, Marilla and Elizabeth. Thank you very much, Dimakatso and Simphiwe, for your excellent presentation. My question is about your participation. I mean, so you've spoken extensively about what it's like to be a peer advisor. I want to just probe your participation in the rest of the project. For instance, because I'm on the project with you, I know that you have participated very actively in the weekly journal club that was started for the project. And I just want to know what sort of connection do you see between being active in the Journal Club with a more conceptual side? And I know myself that you've contributed very much to the presentation that I did at the beginning. Can you maybe just reflect a bit what that sort of conceptual space has meant for you as a peer advisor?
Thank you, Ermien, for the question. So the space of Journal Club has actually been very, very instrumental in actually entrenching the philosophy and the practice of actually academic advising. I mean, for me, before I joined the team, the academic advising program, I've never heard of such a term, and I've never really understood when possibly I've heard of it. I've never really understood as to what it referred to. But the Journal Club space has actually enabled me to just fly within this field and just to learn more about advising itself. And now the connection between that and the peer advising, which I've actually been doing before, is that it's enabling me to actually understand what I've been doing before. Because while I was doing it, I did not understand the impact of what I was doing and the value. But the space of the Journal Club has actually made me to reflect and say to myself, hey, so this is what we've been doing all along. You know, so it has been very phenomenal, and it has been of a great value. And now it's like my eyes have been opened because of the space. Thank you.
Thank you, Ermien. From my side, I'll mention that even I remember last year when we had the monitoring and evaluation workshop, I had said that even if it's a project, I mentioned that the project that you're running, because I had never experienced academic advising. I sometimes wonder that what would have been of me had I had this while I was still an undergraduate student. And also I have a great interest now. I'm more interested in student success. I have done a presentation on that. It's something that I feel that I can contribute more on. It's a great initiative, and I just wish that it could grow more and more, and the visibility in the university could be more. Thank you.
Thanks to both Dimakatso and Simphiwe.
Thank you, Team UCT. We left with 3 minutes for the next presentation. It's going to start at 11:40. If Dimakatso and Simphiwe, if you have 1 minute to say something that you really wanted to say before the end of your presentation, then now is the time. And let's make sure that Megan, Deepti, and Riashna are in the house as well for the next presentation.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you.
Okay. Then if there is nothing from Team UCT, let's give them a round of applause for a wonderful, excellent presentation on UCT CARES agents. Okay, our next presenters, we will start at 11:40. We're going to wait 2 minutes to allow other people to join from other session before you can start. You can get your things ready. My time tells me it's 11:40. And now, since we're still in the UCT house, we're going to get a presentation on leveraging the power of technology, automated informational advising tool for UCT by Team UCT. You're going to get 20 minutes to do the presentation, and then we will have 10 minutes for question and answer at the end of your presentation. And your 20 minutes starts right now.
Thank you and good morning to everyone that's attending our presentation on leveraging the power of technology, an automated information advising tool for UCT as part of the UCT academic advising model. This is a joint presentation done with my colleagues Deepti, Charitar, and Riashna, Sithaldeen, and me, Megan Bam. Next slide, please. In an economic environment in which there's an increasing burden on universities to do more with less by catering to a growing student body with a growing diversity of needs, as well as the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, which affected UCT in unprecedented ways, we were compelled to learn to do things differently in a relatively short space of time. The UCT CARES, Central Advising and Referral System, was one such project that was launched in April 2020 to support the university's efforts to reach out to students and staff by providing them with a central point to which they could direct their queries, as mentioned previously by Riashna and Dimakatso and Simphiwe. Essentially, it was a central email help desk managed by a group of CARES agents. What we discovered, though, was that it was a very time-consuming process to provide the same information individually to students, and the use of automated systems was identified. One of those systems that came up very strongly for us was a chatbot, and it was identified as a convenient entry point into the UCT support structure for three main reasons. One, because it was already an extension of work done by staff and students in the online environment. Number two, it could assist more students with fewer resources, and it could be accessed at any time, and it freed up our agents to deal with more complex queries. Once we had the idea of the chatbot, we also then realized as we were moving along that to implement a chatbot is going to take a long-term development and commitment. And we had an immediate need to reach out to students in the midst of the pandemic last year. So in the meantime, there was an opportunity to rapidly test and pilot another automated tool known as Destination UCT, and Riashna spoke about that in her presentation, and Deepti will speak about that a little bit more. So we used Destination UCT to test the appetite for students, whether they would be interested in such a chatbot tool at UCT. So this presentation outlines the experiences of designing and implementing two automated informational advising tools in the light of doing more with less and in response to the realities of a national pandemic. So our objective was to develop two automated information advising tools. One was Destination UCT, which would be developed in a very short space of time to meet our immediate need, and then to develop the UCT CARES chatbot based on the feedback that we received from Destination UCT. So I'll just take you through the high-level description of these two tools. Destination UCT is hosted on a WhatsApp platform. It's fully automated, but with the option to email an agent if the query wasn't satisfactorily answered. It was developed for emergency use and was specifically targeted at pre-arrival informational advising for new UCT applicants. So therefore, we piloted it specifically around December, January, and the target, as I said, the target audience was prospective students and applicants. On the other hand, the UCT CARES chatbot also is hosted on the WhatsApp platform, is automated, but with the option to chat to a live agent in an omni-channel. And the objective is that it should last beyond the COVID-19 pandemic. The target audience will be all students, and the information that we received and feedback that we received from Destination UCT will be fed into the development of the chatbot. So the methodology that we used, so it wasn't just, we just didn't decide in the moment that we needed a chatbot, but it was also stemmed from the information that we received from the baseline study that was done in 2017 and 2018, when the Academic Advising Project had interviews with key staff members involved in academic advising and focus group sessions with students, and also from lessons learned from the UCT CARES help desk. I'll now hand over to my colleague Deepti to take us on further.
Thank you, Megan. Good morning, everyone. So I will be talking about the design and implementation steps, how to connect to the automated informational advising tools, and about our findings and conclusion. So there were 5 main steps involved in design and implementation. So the first step was the conception and initiation phase. So during this phase, we had to think about what the chatbot should be able to do for us. And during that phase, we also had a conversation with colleagues from the University of the Free State, and they shared their experiences with us about their own chatbot development. And we would like to extend our thanks to our UFS colleagues for that very helpful session. And then at UCT, there was the communication and marketing department, who was also interested in developing a chatbot some time ago, but the project did not go ahead. So we also had to draw from their lessons learned to our own project. The second phase was about engaging with stakeholders. We engaged with the ICTS unit internally at UCT and with an external stakeholder known as SIS Global Services. And the third step was developing the proof of concept. In this stage at UCT, we developed a database of frequently asked questions. And it was actually quite a very simple database. It was just on Google Sheet. And then we sent that information to the external stakeholders, who then set up the chatbot and the channel via which agents were onboarded and trained on how to respond to queries. And the next step was about the testing and evaluation. So we made the UCT CARES chatbot available to only a small number of users at UCT, because we're interested in having their feedback on how the chatbot actually is performing. And our next step, which is the implementation, is actually a work in progress. And as my colleague Megan was mentioning earlier, we had the opportunity to build a Destination UCT and pilot and test it in a much shorter time period. And this was done in Konobo, which is also an external service provider. And in terms of connecting to the tools, it's very simple to connect to those tools. So a user just had to add the number to their contact list on WhatsApp, and they can just type in hi and the menu will pop up. And the 2 screenshots on my slide, you can see how the Destination UCT tool is and the UCT CARES chatbot. In terms of reporting on Destination UCT, we launched it on the 7th of January this year, and until the end of April 2021, we had over 17,000 unique users who accessed the platform, and over 44,000 questions were answered. And the top 4 categories where most questions have been answered were admissions and housing, funding and fees, orientation, and how to apply to UCT. And this is kind of expected because our target audience were applicants only. In terms of reporting on the chatbot, we launched it towards the end of January to only a small group of people at UCT. And they provided us with some very useful feedback regarding technical issues, functionality issues, and whether the chatbot was user-friendly or not. And when we received those feedback from them, we engaged with the external stakeholders, who then implemented those changes as and when needed. And our next plan is to launch the chatbot to all students in next semester. In terms of our findings, we found that there was an increased efficiency when using automated informational advising tools. And this is because a greater number of students could be served with a quick turnaround time. As I mentioned previously, we had over 44,000 questions which were answered on the tool. And if these questions had to be answered by agents, this would be like a very tedious task. And there was also a reduction in live agent time on multiple queries which were related to the same topic. So the agents could have more time to solve the more complex queries that my colleagues Simphiwe and Dimakatso mentioned in the previous presentation. And since the tool was fully automated, there was a consistent level and quality of response which was maintained, as there was a reduction in human errors, which can usually happen while typing in the answers. And as I was mentioning, the database was just basically on Google Sheets, so we could easily update the information instantly, especially at the beginning of the year where information was constantly changing for first-year students. The Deputy Registrar's Office would be in touch with us, and we would just be keeping to update the information so that students could be updated. And the Destination UCT tool also allowed us to identify emerging topics. So what was the topics that students were most interested in and at which stage? So those topics could be identified timeously. And we also found that traffic on the tool is dependent on the target audience and the student's academic journey. So for Destination UCT, our target audience was applicants. So that's why at the beginning of the year, from January to April, there was huge traffic on the tool. But then after April, once the students were settled in at the institution, the traffic on the tool really went down. And in terms of the financial implications, it's very costly to run automated information advising tools. And it's very important that funding has to be secured for a longer term development. And in terms of our conclusion, the results from student engagement with the UCT CARES chatbot and Destination UCT will be used to advance academic advising practices at UCT. And also from our experiences of designing and implementing automated information advising tools for UCT, we found that there are several important variables for leveraging the power of technology in information advising, and these are stakeholder engagement, adequate resourcing, effective communication, flexible leadership, and an appetite for implementation. And this is the end of our presentation. Thank you everyone for listening. And if there is any question, me and my colleagues would be happy to try and respond to them. Thank you all.
Thank you, Megan and Deepti, for an excellent presentation on the leveraging power of technology, showcasing the automated information advising tool at UCT. Are there any questions from the participants? Please raise your hand and then we will recognize you. If you have any comments or questions and you don't want to talk, you can post it on the chat. The floor is open. If there are no comments, then we will leave early today. I should, Ermien, you are recognized.
Sorry, can we take the PowerPoint down so that we can see hands?
Okay, so I will speak in the meantime. Thank you so much, Deepti and Megan, for your beautiful presentation. I want to ask a provocative question. Both of you worked as agents on, well, both of you have worked as advisors, seeing students face-to-face, but also online. And I was wondering whether you could maybe just reflect for a moment what it was like to work on an automated system, given that you started off as either face-to-face in the pre-COVID days or online advisors before you worked on this automated advising.
For this question, Ermien, for me, I would say that since we mentioned it's when you're interacting with a student face-to-face, or maybe just having a conversation with them on the phone, it's a very different interaction altogether. Because then I think Dimakatso also mentioned, or Simphiwe mentioned it in the previous presentation, you can't really see like facial expressions or anything like that. So in terms of using a chatbot, it's mainly just to provide information. And it's the idea is just to give the information as is, and it's not like an interactive kind of advising. But of course, the chatbot, when we will be launching next semester, it will give the option to chat to a live agent. And then that, I would say like the interactiveness might be happening at that stage. Thank you. I'm not sure if Megan would like to add to that.
Thanks, Deepti.
Hi, yes, Ermien. The idea around the chatbot that I mentioned, the omni-channel, was the option for the student then to connect with a live agent, either by the live agent contacting them directly, but so that they get some sort of human interaction.
Okay, thank you, Megan and Deepti, for that. There are a couple of questions coming through your way now. May I ask, this is coming from Ashton, how much did the chatbot cost per year?
Thank you, Ashton, for this question. I think Riashna might be in a better position to answer to that question.
Sure. Thanks, Deepti. Yeah, so Ashton, as we mentioned, we had two separate, these were two separate innovations with different service providers. The first one, which was Destination UCT, that we launched very quickly, that one is really difficult to really say, because we were the first use case for the company, and we were hosted on a staging platform. So that was costing 10,000 a month in terms of staging, but we only did that for 4 months. However, the full chatbot is a little bit more, quite a bit more cost effective. Our pilot on that, the POC, the proof of concept that Deepti mentioned, that cost us about 100,000 to run the full pilot, and that was developing the whole system, including the agent platforms and all of that. And now we are looking at about I would say 100 to maybe 200,000 a year for the full chatbot. There are many variables that go into the costing. Those include things like how many questions, how many knowledge bases, how many agents you have in there, because that affects all the various licenses and things like that. So yeah, that's the long and the short answer. I can certainly give you more detail offline if you would like.
Okay, and next question, they have a comment to say thank you for the presentation, but there is a follow-up question, and this comes from Zina. Do you see POPIA affecting the use of chat boxes and the storing of data?
Shall I take this one, Megan? Or would you like to answer?
No, you can take that one, Riashna, saying it was mentioned in the previous presentation also.
Right. Thanks, Megan. So that's a very good question. And the answer is we have yet to fully explore this. So we are working currently with the registrar's office. Our plan at the moment is not necessarily to store the data. What we are doing is, this is for the beginning until we get all of these ducks in a row. At the moment, we are being very careful. So we have ethics clearances, for example, from the institutional side that covers a lot of stuff. We also are making sure that the kinds of data that we are collecting, the students are very aware. So part of the last conversation we had with Chatterbox was, how do we make sure that all of the questions that we ask students right at the beginning aligns with our ethics clearance and POPI? So the answer is, Zina, is that it will affect what we're doing. We are currently in the middle of exploring exactly how and how it might limit our data collection. So I don't have a very satisfactory answer for you, but it is a truthful one. So what is the space answer?
Thank you, Riashna. And it seems like there are no questions. It's just comments from the chat. From Dorothea, she's just acknowledging and saying, wonderful presentation. Thank you. It's wonderful and highly relevant work. And Ashton says, you answered the question. He thought it was going to be more than that. So he thought,
yeah, I also thought it was a little bit expensive, but actually it was, yeah, I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. And Zina also is saying, thank you. We're going through the same at the moment. And are there no more other questions? Now is the chance to ask Riashna and Megan and Deepti questions regarding the chat box. And if there are no further questions or comments, then it takes us to the end of our concurrent sessions. Before you leave, I just want to bring to your attention that the next session, please come back for the afternoon session that will start at 3 o'clock. And have a lovely day. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon. See you at 3.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.